Back like we never left B.D.A. And I know a lot of people did not like this chapter or love this chapter, but there's so many things to talk about. I'm really surprised that people didn't like it. So we're not going to waste any time. We're just going to get right into the chapter. First, let me say, if you're here for the first time, make sure you like and subscribe and join the Discord. The link will be in the description box down below. Okay, so the first thing that we got to talk about is obviously Law. Law, at this point, he's left the Alliance, or he's left the crew and where the crew is because of Shinobu and the things that Shinobu has said. Now, Shinobu, she was out of pocket for blaming Law for everything that's transpired. The reason why this is so ironic is that Law was telling the Straw Hats when they were running away that if they get captured, they should not snitch at any cost. So I would presume he has told his crew the same thing. So for him to get accused of that, or his crew to get accused of that, that must have really angered Law, because even at the same time, when he was telling Usopp about this, Usopp said, I would snitch in a heartbeat. So Law is just like, in an alliance, you need to have trust. And at this point, I can't leave it in your hand. And of course, his crewmates' lives are in danger, so he has to take it into his own hands, especially if like the trust right now is kind of broken and there is some tension. So Law leaving, I'm not mad at it, but Shinobu is definitely in the wrong for doing so. Nami did make it clear. She's been waiting for 20 long years. But at this point, you cannot be blaming people in your alliance if you want this to succeed. Of course, Usopp then reaffirms that, hey, if I was captured, I would have snitched as well. And Nami says the same, like she would last 3 seconds. So I think that will be an interesting storyline. Someone mentioned last night that Law could probably run into Kid, because at this point we have no idea where Kid is. So if Law runs into Kid, that could be another interesting meetup, because I'm sure Law hasn't seen Kid, or we're assuming since pre-time skip, or at least we haven't seen them meet eyes since pre-time skip at Sabaody. The reason why this is so problematic is that I think Law was basically filling in for Luffy and giving directions and kind of keeping the crew in order in some capacity. And now Law isn't there. It's like they're spreading themselves a bit more thin. Now, who do you look to for stability? But I would more so expect a collaborative effort between Nami and Sanji to come up with something in the next plan of action. So they're in Ibisu, close to Man Yasu's house. If you guys remember, well, there are 3 guys now. The 3 guys that have been exiled from the capital. And if you guys remember, these 3 guys are the same guys that were in love with Kurosaki, as they mentioned in this chapter. We actually saw them before. They were about to attack Kurosaki at her procession. They were trying to attack her there, and they got cut down by the guy that had a blade similar to Whitebeard's, right? But the thing is, we only saw Bingo. He was the only guy we actually saw engaging with Kurosaki. He gave up everything for Kurosaki, and Kurosaki played him for a fool after he gave up everything to try to be with her. So essentially, all of these guys fell in love with Kurosaki, and she used them for their money. At that point, we were judging Kurosaki based on what she did, and Oda at this point is trying to justify everything Kurosaki did by saying these guys are scumbags. Bingo, Bongo, and Bungo. So everything that happened to these guys was kind of justice, because they were ripping people off. One was committing arson, and one was profiting from the lumber, and one was profiting from Bingo, the one that we saw on screen with Kurosaki. He was a casket maker. So all these guys were working together to scheme these people out of their money. So Kurosaki was basically giving a poetic justice in a way. So of course, being exiled, they were told to live in Old Man Yasu's house. Now, Old Man Yasu, this was somewhat of a character defining chapter for him by giving us more insight into his character. Now, Yasu, based on what we know, remember Yasu met Zoro in Ibisu, or on the way to Ibisu town, and Zoro somewhat saved him from some gamblers. Yasu and everyone in his town, in Ibisu town, they loved him. He basically was feeding them and doing everything for his people. Everyone loved Yasu, even called him their saint. They're giving us more insight as far as like the things he does for the city, the town. I know people were speculating this before, but Yasu being the witching hour boy makes a lot more sense now. I mean, it did back then, but of course now I think this is driving the point home. Even back then, when Yasu went back to Ibisu town with Zoro, they said, hey, the witching hour boy came again. I think that indicates that Yasu, he's never really there when the witching hour boy gets there. I think that means he's more than likely the witching hour boy. Of course, the witching hour boy, he's the guy that goes around the capital, that steals and feeds to the poor, basically the Robin Hood of Wano. So I believe Yasu's a witching hour boy, and Yasu seems to like giving back to people and helping people. The thing is that the connection he has with the people around him, it's it's honestly amazing. Like, everyone knows him by name, everyone looks up to him, everyone just appreciates how kind he is. A key detail they also mentioned was that Yasu sold his daughter to the capital, which is Otoko, and a lot of people were speculating that Otoko could be his daughter because Otoko loved to laugh, as the people of Ebisu town did as well. That was their laughing, their pain away, not letting starvation get to them, and Otoko was the same way. When we met Otoko, of course, she was the courtesan in training. She was with Komurasaki, and right now she's working in the capital and sending money back to Yasu, and Yasu giving it to the people. So it's also, it's really insane. I wouldn't be surprised if also Toko is also giving information to Yasu. I'm not sure if they communicate a lot verbally, but I'm sure when they can or when they do, she gives information to Yasu. A funny thing as well was that Yasu was communicating with Frankie, Robin, all these guys, and they had no idea who he was. Kanjuro as well. Personally, for me, this rules out the fact that he is Denjiro, because Kanjuro would have noticed it by now, unless he's gone through a crazy transformation throughout time. But for him, he's actually said he's going to fight alongside the Alliance, and he's going to be ready for the final battle. And with Yasu and his connections, that's a lot of people that's willing to follow Yasu. So Yasu essentially is going to be a general in this army, right? So it's going to be, of course, Luffy, Kid, those guys at the top, but the people right beneath it, kind of leading different factions, would be Yasu, Raizo, Kanjuro, Kinemon, where he's not officially a red scabbard, but I think he's going to fill a role that's similar to those guys. They even mentioned Kawamatsu in this arc, or in this chapter. I'll talk about that a bit later. But Yasu is going to be an important part of this battle because of everything they're building up to now, and he just seems like the type of person that's willing to help. Oda could throw a massive curveball and say Yasu has been a bad guy from the beginning and just been collecting information to give to Orochi. Based on what we've seen so far, I don't think that's the type of guy he is. A small part as well that I thought was interesting that Oda decided to leave out, when there was a random woman who knew a lot about Komurasaki and Yasu and everything that was going on, and Nami even asked her who she was and she did not answer. She's the one that gave the information about Bingo, Bongo, and Bungo. So for her, Nami's asking who she is. Oda skipped past that point, so I expect her to be someone we know. I was saying, could it possibly be Lady Toki? It's not enough to go off of, but it's just interesting that she was highlighted so much and she knew so much for Nami to point it out. So that's something we should probably keep in mind. We're back in the Prisoner Mines, and Luffy's still trying to learn the technique that really used Sentomaru and of course Grandpa Hyo, right? So he's trying to learn that technique, and then they're describing it at this point as Ryu. We'll see exactly what the official translation says, but I think we're going to get an official name here at this point. But they're saying in Wano, they focus more on flow, the concept of flow. So essentially flowing whatever it is into your weapon or blade or the opposing person. I talked about this a bit in my Understanding Invisible Haki Goken video. That will be linked below if you want to check that out. But this is giving us some more context with this power or this technique. Essentially, it is Haki, right? But in the translation box, it's translating to flowing Sakura, and it shares the same pronunciation as Dragon King / Emperor. My theory while I was reading the chapter was saying, okay, could this possibly tie into Luffy's Conqueror's Haki, the power of the Supreme King, and combining that with his actual Armin Haki? This would be weird because that would kind of indicate that everyone who has used this technique has some semblance of King's Haki, and we've seen, again, Sentomaru use it, the Admirals use it, Hyogoro use it. We don't know about any of the Admirals having Conqueror's Haki other than Sengoku, so it's a bit weird there. I think it's probably just a pronunciation thing. We'll see what the Viz says, but I thought it was interesting for them to mention Dragon King / Emperor. Of course, for Kaido, I would expect him to have King's Haki, but the fact that they focus on flow is an interesting concept. Another thing I want to point out, Luffy is attempting to use this technique while having his fist balled up. Everyone we have seen use this technique, they have an open palm. So Luffy is essentially, with his fist, is stopping that flow, closing his palm, and trying to go. So I think, honestly, Luffy's using the technique wrong. I think you have to open your palm to let it flow out, because Luffy closing his fist is keeping that flow in, because Luffy so right now is kind of focused on brute strength, when they're saying it's not about strength, it's about flow. Hyogoro even said, rather than exerting power, you should take the unnecessary Haki surrounding your body and make it flow through your fist. Now I want to say something about this. I don't think how Luffy's doing it is impossible. I think if he masters it this way, it'll be a bit stronger than how we've seen it before, honestly. But I think an easier way to do it is to probably open your palm. So we'll see where that goes, but I think it's an interesting concept. Now, the process of unnecessary Haki surrounding your body, this brings up so many different arguments or so many different theories, because Haki is always around your body. So you can use the Haki around you and harness it to create power. This goes back to obviously Big Mom and her invisible haki that's always around her. Again, drives the point home. Big Mom's specialty is armament haki. Not really sure how many people have actually watched Magi, but in Magi, they use a power called Rook, and it's similar to haki, chakra, and then whatever. And you harness the Rook around you to increase your strength. So in this way, I think that's where haki is going. We're using the haki around you to improve your power instead of just using willpower, because haki seems to be a flowing thing, like a thing that's always around, lingering in the air. Before, it was described as your own personal willpower. I guess if you're strong enough, that willpower can leak out and also just be a part of you around it, a part of your essence, so you can use that and harness it. The person that we think about, of course, is Shanks. When Shanks got on the ship, his essence in haki was so powerful, it was destroying the ship. And imagine if Shanks has the ability to harness that essence around him and use it as a weapon. So it's interesting where haki is going. Oda's definitely providing more exposition on it, and I'm loving it right now. So news travels fast. Hyogoro asks Luffy about fighting Kaido and asking him, why do you want to fight Kaido? I heard you lost to him already. And Luffy basically giving a breakdown, hey, I want to be Pirate King. Kaido's in my way. I have to beat him to become Pirate King, which isn't really the case, but that's how Luffy wants to go about it. And out of nowhere pops Raizo and Caribou. Now Caribou, a lot of people thought, including myself, that Caribou went with Kid, but at this point Caribou is with Raizo and he doesn't have handcuffs on him. Based in the chapter, apparently Raizo mistook like his cuffs for Luffy's and he unlocked Caribou. A quick thing to point out was that the keys were supposedly in the sea stone box, so I'm not sure how Raizo was able to do it. We presume Raizo has a devil fruit, I think, so I'm not really sure how that was able to work out, but Caribou's free, and Caribou in some ways has pledged allegiance to Luffy, to serve Luffy and to follow Luffy. Now, Luffy looked at him for a little bit and said, hey, you're not a bad person anymore, you can come with us. I don't know about that, because Caribou is a sly, sinister, slick guy. We'll see where he goes with it. With Caribou, I expect him to at this point, help the Straw Hat crew. Do I expect him to fully convert? I don't know, because he has some important information in regards to Poseidon. I think he could use that as a way to kind of get out of Wano. That's like his get out of jail free card. So we'll see where that goes with Caribou. Some people were trolling, saying that Caribou could be the next Straw Hat or the next Nakama. Relax, that's not happening. If Caesar didn't join, Caribou sure in hell isn't joining. Every time Raizo talks about devil fruit powers as demonic arts, I always love it, because it's just so crazy how they've maintained this whole mystique as far as the outside world, and everything's just so closed off to Wano that they think of all these unnatural things as like demonic powers. So that's interesting. Hyogoro's small speech was also moving, where he talked about accepting death, right? And now knowing the red scabbards are alive and Odin's son Momonosuke is still alive, the spark of rebellion has yet to be extinguished. So that's also great that Hyogoro now has a will to live. And he also mentioned some key information that we cannot overlook. In addition to their current location and the prisoners that are there are 4 additional areas in the prisoner mines just as big as where they are, where there's tens of thousands of prisoners in Udon that basically their only crime is rebellion against Orochi. So they call this basically the blind spot of Kaido and Orochi. He mentions former Yakuza bosses, and all the anger of the country had been festering, and they're willing to fight for the name Kozuki. So it makes sense that Momonosuke is actually on his way there, because he would be the rallying cry to kind of bring these people together, because I don't think initially everyone is going to be ready, because they're not going to believe some random kid from out of Wano, right? They're not going to just believe Luffy, oh, we have to follow Luffy. Momonosuke has to be there. If you remember, Momonosuke back then with Luffy said, you have to take charge. You have to be the one to ask for help. So for Momonosuke, this is another moment in his development that I think he's going to have to take and show that he's willing to lead these people into battle to retake Wano. Raizo did mention Kawamatsu as the person they have to break out at all costs. There's a theory going around about Kawamatsu, and I know people have talked about it before, as far as him being a Kappa. Now my guy Miraz, Brooks Wisdom on Discord, we talk all the time, and he also sends me a lot of information that he picks up from the chapters. So I want to give Miraz a shout out right now, because he sent me some information as far as Kawamatsu and things we can learn about him, or things he found out about Kawamatsu, or theory on Kawamatsu, I should say. He said that Kappas are mythical river monsters, creatures that eat fish. They like human behavior. In Japanese mythology, they challenge humans with sumo wrestling matches. And if you remember back then when Luffy was sumo wrestling, Kawamatsu did say, I wish I could wrestle as well. He believes that he's a mythical zone user, or he's a mink. Kawamatsu is another word for Kappa, and it means otter. So the Kawamatsu name meaning, historically surnames evolved as a way to sort people into groups by occupation, place of origin, clan affiliation, patronage, parentage, adoption, and even physical characteristics like red hair. otter got red hair. So that's Miraz's like theory on Kawamatsu as far as like what he is. Awesome information, thing that I think that I did not know before. I know there was a theory out there on Kawamatsu, but I didn't really do some research on it. I really didn't care that much. Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate it. That's basically it for the chapter. Luffy said, okay, all we gotta do is destroy the place and get a lot of allies. Momonosuke is on the way. Big Mom is on the way. It's a lot going on there with Big Mom because we're not sure exactly how she's gonna be because of Oshiruko. Again, Queen is another like random thing that's going on because in this chapter, he said Luffy's destroying too many men too quickly, and we know he's the plague. He wants to wear Luffy down, but that's not gonna work. Luffy just fought Katakuri for 11 plus hours. Luffy, I think, will be fine. Now, Luffy, he needs some food, so I'm not sure where that's gonna come from. He needs to eat because remember back in Whole Cake Island when he didn't eat for a while, he started shriveling up. I don't think that's gonna happen here, but you know, we'll see how it goes down. So let me know what you think about this chapter. I thought it was a very good chapter upon reread, and the thing is, I went back and reread a lot of chapters with Yasu and Kinemon and all those guys to kind of like bring these things together to kind of get a better feel for Yasu's character. And Yasu overall has been a great person from what we've seen in the story. I'm seeing theories going around about Yasu possibly being Momonosuke's grandfather. I'm not sure about that, which would be, of course, Oden's dad. We'll see. Leave your thoughts below. Like the video. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.